We have Professor Simon Burgess on my right, from the University of Bolton. Bristol. That's my sort of novel that's coming out.
I'm sure Bolton's fantastic.
We have Madeleine Holt on my left from Meet the Parents. We have Harry Cutty on the end, Head Teacher of Cantel School and Chair of Aspire Community Trust. And then at the end on the left we have Alexa Collins, who is the Labour Party parliamentary candidate for Beaconsfield.
Oh.
Yeah, so four fantastic speakers, and I think without any further ado, we're just going to go straight into the speeches. So the plan is to each speaker talk for around 5 to 7 minutes, and then we'll open up the event to questions from the floor. So Professor Simon Burgess, you're up first.
Thank you. And yeah, thanks very much for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here and looking forward to this. So I gather almost all of you have spent an hour in an AGM before we get to this, so I don't know whether you're all feeling unusually belligerent or overexcited or anything, but hopefully it'll go okay. So central to my work is an interest in trying to understand the inequalities in the school system that we have here, and maybe what we can do about it. And one of those inequalities is trying to understand why particular types of kids end up in particular types of schools. Now, so that's about school admissions, that's about the process by which children get assigned to different schools. Now, as this group will know better than anybody, we have a number of grammar schools still in this country, so that's definitely part of the system. I've done work on grammar schools, so I'm very happy to talk about that later on in the Q&A. But I'm going to talk to you about school choice and about school admissions. That seems to fit quite well with the title of the panel of getting parents on board. And I'd like to share with you some new research that we've been doing. So the school assignment problem is a very big issue indeed. Every year we have something like 650,000 students, so all lined up in a row, and we have 650,000 roughly school places, and we have to have a system that will say which kid gets to go to which school. It's a huge and complex problem. Different countries around the world do this in different ways. Like I said, apart from the grammar schools here, we do it through a system of school choice. That's very easy to understand in principle. Families get to write down, they get to nominate 3 typically or 6 schools that they would like their child to go. If those schools are not oversubscribed, then that's the end of the matter and that's where the child goes. If the schools are oversubscribed, then the school has a set of priorities that either if it's its own admissions authority and academy, or the local authority will administer, and then that decides who goes where. So I think it's fair to say that school choice is not a universally popular way of doing school admissions. Some people see it as a sham, it's all just a charade, and the outcome is sort of predetermined, people aren't taking it seriously. Some people see it as a pointless extra stress for parents, people get all worked up about it, but it doesn't really make a difference. And other people see it as being very unfair, just a mechanism for perpetuating educational inequality and generating segregation. So I'm going to tell you about some things that we found out using some new data, where we have access to, from the Department for Education, of the preferences, the names that families write down. It's all, everyone's completely anonymised, and we get to analyse those preferences. And so here we go. So first of all, it's not a sham. People take it seriously. A quarter of those 650,000 parents use all of the choices that they can on their form. So here in London you have 6 choices, in Bristol we have 3, different local authorities do it in different ways. But over a quarter of the people use all of the choices they can. 2/3 of people make more than one choice, so they're not just sort of doing the bare minimum. So obviously that's going to vary around the country. So in Southwark, I'm just looking down here in my notes, for example in Southwark, over 30% of parents make all 6 choices. That's nearly 1/3 doing everything they can to get their kid into the school that they want. Up in Northumberland, very, very rural area, 80% only make one choice. Okay, so it's going to vary by urban and rural, but on average people make a lot of choices. Now here's one thing that we found that surprises a lot of people. A lot of people have the view that, well, people just choose their local school, or maybe people just want to go to their local school, and all of this sort of fussing around comparing schools is a load of nonsense. That's not true. That's not true. I'm talking secondary schools here, by the way. Only 39% of households put their local school, their nearest school, as the top choice. Okay? Only 55% put it as one of the top three. So it simply is not the case that everyone wants to go to their local school, or that everyone wants their local school to be in the top three choices. And here's the thing: families that bypass their local school, they're taking a proactive view of which school they'd like their kid to go to. People are looking at many things, no doubt. One of the things they're looking at is the academic quality, as revealed by GCSE scores of that school. And so for parents who bypass their local school and put another school further away, obviously, as their top choice, that further away school has a much higher academic quality. Okay? Not saying that's the only thing that matters, not saying it's the only thing that should matter. What I'm reporting to you is that people who choose a school other than their nearest local school are choosing a school with a higher level of academic performance. Second point is that school choice is not pointless, it makes a difference. On average, people who make more of the choices that they can end up with their child going to a higher performing school than the people who make fewer choices. I think that's very easy to understand, and that makes a lot of sense. If you're going to write down 6 choices, let's say, then you can have a couple of safety choices. You could even have 3 safety choices in 6, 5 and 4, and then you could have 3 more ambitious choices where you think there's a chance your kid could get in, but it's not certain. Okay, but you need to have your safety choice just in case your kid doesn't get into one of your top 3. If you're only allowed 3 choices, then the scope for being ambitious is much reduced. And it's a fact in our data that the people who make more choices end up controlling for all kinds of things, end up making with their child going to a higher performing school. Again, I'm not saying that's everything, but it's a something, and it's a big something. So school choice is not a sham. People take it seriously, and people act to do the best that they can. It does make a difference. Oh, and by the way, I slip another little point in here. The proportion of families choosing a school other than their nearest is the same for families eligible for free school meals and families not eligible for free school meals. The number of choices, the number of people making just one choice, the number of people making all of the choices they can are the same between poorer families and more affluent families. The looking at academic quality to decide where to go is the same for poor and rich families. So the kind of myth that we hear that, oh, poor families, they just want their kid to be happy, they don't care about it, it's not true. It's not true. So finishing up, so it's not a sham, it makes a difference, and there are not differences you might expect to see between rich and poor in terms of those actions. But on the final point, me and my co-authors completely agree. The way the system works is unfair, does not work well for poorer families. But the reason for that is not in the choosing, the actions by the parents. The reason for that is in the priorities that schools are allowed to have. And in particular, most important of all, is the proximity rule. That if you live near to a school, you can get in. So all of the little tricks that we hear about, the little middle-class tricks of getting your kid to be good at music or faith schools, or all these kind of things, they matter, they're important, but they are as nothing compared to the importance of house prices and proximity. So that, I think, is where reform is needed, rather than the school choice process as a whole. Happy to talk about some ideas that we've had later on. So I am finishing. Just want to say that that work on school choice is with Anna Vignoles from Cambridge and Ellen Greaves from Bristol. The work on grammar schools, if we get to that, is with Lindsay McMillan from IOE UCL and Matt Dixon from Bristol.
Thank you very much, Simon. Some interesting points there on school choice, which I'm sure will get picked up a bit later. Questions. Next up, we have Madeleine Holt from Meet the Parents.
Thanks, Phil. So thanks for inviting me to speak here. It's great to be able to share with you a bit more information about the Meet the Parents project, which I have been running with my colleague Izzy Nash, who's in the audience here, for the last 7 years. And it's really interesting to hear what Simon's been saying from his research, because it does actually very much correlate with what we've been finding out about growing levels of anxiety from parents about schools, and particularly focusing on academic results. So just to tell you very simply what Meet the Parents is, it's an incredibly straightforward idea which is actually really hard to execute. Basically, back in 2012, I was starting to think about secondaries. I was talking to families who had sent their kids to the local secondaries where I live, which is sort of Islington, Camden, and the families seemed to be pretty happy about their experience in the schools. Then I spoke to the primary school parents in my children's primary, and they were absolutely consumed by anxiety and had an incredibly negative impression of the local schools. And so for me, I'm an ex-journalist who used to be correspondent on Newsnight. I thought actually there's an information gap here, because there is not, at the moment, a formalised way in which parents at primary can get the very latest information on their secondary schools. And as we all know here, schools change really fast because of Ofsted, because of the pressures to have every single cohort make the same progress at the same time. The pressure on heads is immense. And we know from experience that schools can totally turn around their situation within 2 years, and that can be reflected in results at GCSE, for example, and in progress throughout the school. So my thought at that time was, let's just do something really simple and bring these families into the primary schools of an evening in September, just before the families were putting down their choices, but we also always invited parents further down primary because the anxiety kicks in so early now. And initially we just invited parents, hence the title Meet the Parents, and then we discovered that actually the teenagers were the best of all, because, if I can say this publicly, they don't bullshit. They tell it how it is, and obviously where I was, I felt that their experience was good, so we invited teenagers who were positive about their experience, and I felt that was a fair and accurate reflection of what was happening in those schools. But we encourage in our sessions honesty, frankness. We coax out of them things they don't like about their school, and we found that the primary parents love that. They don't believe a comprehensive school can be 100% amazing. They just don't believe it. I think we know some of the reasons for that, and I will go into those in a minute. But it's a kind of weird kind of reverse psychology, where if we can get the teenagers to say, well, actually, I don't really like the toilets very much, I don't like the food, which is invariably something they say, it really reassures the parents. Then we have a little informal session afterwards. Sometimes we have wine and nibbles and all the rest of it, where parents can go up to teenagers or parents from secondaries and ask them, will my child get to Oxbridge if they go to the school, sort of thing, that they feel a bit uneasy mentioning in a more public forum. We keep it really friendly. We have 2 semicircles normally. Then we get a database, we get feedback, and actually we have just been working with these researchers from Queen Mary University of London, and I can reveal the results of their research now, actually, to try and get our key performance indicators on how effective our scheme is. And we have discovered that, if you can imagine a typical event will have maybe the 4 closest comprehensives there. There'll be maybe 2 or 3 people from each school, so you've got a panel of maybe up to 12 people. And for every single event that the comprehensive pays for, they will get 1 extra child coming to their school. Now in Camden, we're very fortunate, our funding is 6,800 per student. So that's 34,000 over 5 years coming to that comprehensive. Given the number of events that we're now doing in Camden, which is in almost half of all primaries, that's bringing in £2.2 million to Camden's education budget. And if you work out the return on investment, it's enormous, actually. So, in terms of, Joe asked me to talk about what I thought the driving factors were in terms of parental attitudes. Picking up on what Simon says, I certainly think that results have become really much more important, and that's fed by this kind of total neurosis, I think. I actually think parents are now being made to feel guilty if they don't worry about secondary school choice. I mean, I'm probably a minority. I'm a parent who sent my children to the local comprehensive just after it had been put into requires improvement, because I knew all the research showing that my attitude to education would be the transcending factor. Now the school is massively oversubscribed, and I'd like to take some responsibility for well, not all, you know, we poached a great hen, but so I think that there's a kind of web of neurosis, and there's so many different factors in this web, and they all kind of feed each other, so we are creating and have created a kind of perfect storm of anxiety. So the first key factor is ignorance. And that's what really fed me, the parents, that parents simply don't know about their local school because our societies are so atomised. They don't necessarily know families in the street whose kids are at the local secondary schools. They only know other families in their class at primary school, and they're all worrying together and all feeding off each other, and it's just a frenzy. I also think that the debate in the media in this country about education, sadly, could be a lot deeper than it is. So parents don't, for example, know the more kind of general facts about comprehensive education now, which is that schools are under huge pressure from Ofsted, kids can't fall through the cracks in the way they could when I was at school. Bullying is now, you know, very, very much more on the agenda, safeguarding, all these things. Lots of parents simply don't know about that, so we get a lot of questions about bullying. Will my child be pushed? Will my child fall through the cracks? You know, that kind of thing. So fear is the thing that brings everything together. The fact that obviously, I mean, let's be honest, it's a class issue. I mean, the establishment have never bought into comprehensive education, and that has so many ramifications in terms of media coverage. You know, we know about how many editors went to private schools and grammar schools. You know, it's a kind of othering thing for them. And I know from my experience at Newsnight, where I had half my editors were privately educated and half of them were comprehensive educated, and I think that the ones that were state educated were much more likely to commission news pieces about comprehensives. So you see that trickling down in the media. I then think, you know, we have, as Simon's referred to, we have this hyper-choice. Since 2010, things have got a lot harder in terms of selling comprehensives because parents are so confused. Free schools, academies, faith schools, community schools, grammar schools. It makes it much harder to take down the levels of anxiety. Then there's the hyper-individualism, which we've had for 40 years, about you know, being sharp-elbowed, giving your child a head start. That feeds into the social mobility agenda about, you know, getting a small number of academic kids into this trajectory towards success in life, even though there's no link, as we know, between academic performance and success, however you define it. Obsession with measurements, which is not a conservative thing. I mean, Blair, I think, arguably would be, you know, somebody who really pushed that. So, in the end, we see in our discussions, which I think are really important, because we try and actually talk to parents about what does a good education look like, and we try to say through our families who have obviously feel that their experience of education and comprehensive is more than just what can be measured. This is what matters to us. The school is local. My children have friends locally. They can look out for them on the walk to school. They have classes, sometimes, not always, mixed ability, where they can try and work in teams with other people from different backgrounds, which, incidentally, Andreas Schleicher, the PISA man, said recently was going to be a key trait in us going forward to try and solve some of our enormous problems in life. All these things, the values that our children come out with from a properly functioning comprehensive, this is the sort of thing that we hear about on these panels. And it's so important to have these conversations, to put league tables into context. League tables, yes, grammars and private schools will be at the top. Why? Because of the intake. People don't realise. And actually, I've come out of these 7 years much more tolerant of why parents make decisions to put their children into silos. Because we do not have a serious level of debate in this country about this. I never cease to be amazed that people will put their children into grammar schools and private schools, and they literally will not realise the effect that has on local schools. It doesn't occur to them. Perfectly nice people, perfectly moral, perfectly kind. It's just that the connection is not there. And the reason it's not there is because the media don't talk about it enough, I think, personally. And also people feel very inhibited. to talk about it. I mean, I'm sure I'm in the same boat as Melissa, that I don't get invited to dinner parties anymore because I can't stop talking about it. And then the wine flows, and then, I haven't been invited round to that house for the last few months, and now it's a few years. And it's because I'll have a conversation which I think is not really worthwhile, which is, why did you send your child to a grammar school? They're getting up at 6:30 in the morning. It's just cruel. Why didn't you keep them in the community? You know, I've learned there is really no point. Once parents have made that decision, you have to kind of do what I know Melissa's very good at, which is, is my children at the local comprehensive? But yes, they have extra tuition for Oxbridge. Of course, they may not want to go to Oxbridge, but there's lots of children who have been to Oxbridge. This is a much more effective way, I think, of playing it. So. And I think also, at the end of the day, these decisions about schools are emotional. I'm emotionally drawn to comprehensives, to the idea of my child being in the community with people from different backgrounds. It's a reflection of my education at the comprehensive. My dad set up a progressive comprehensive in the 60s, sadly no longer in existence. It's an academy, that would have finished him off. Luckily, he wasn't around when that happened. And I think likewise people, I'm going to wind up, people who are drawn to selective schools, they like the straw boater thing. You know, actually I think if you show people two images, one of a kind of maybe somebody not in a uniform, sitting around discussing, and then a kid in a kind of uniform with all the Latin mottos and the boater, I think that actually decides fundamentally what decision you will make. I don't want the boater. I want the kids in the hoodies, no uniform, discursive education, critical thinking, and I think these things are emotional and they reflect your parenting probably and your experience in life. But I am positive, and I think now is the moment for comprehensive education to really be sold, not in a way that grammar schools are bad, but to say we need to bring our society together. School is the glue. Yeah, there's nothing else. Our communities are shattered, and this is the moment we have to start hearing from policymakers that comprehensives are actually going to redeem us.
Thank you very much, Madeleine. I would just pick up on the editor point. I did go to private school. I went to a very comprehensive in Blackpool. So.
I can tell. I actually pride myself on seeing if I can guess who went to a comprehensive. I'm quite good at it.
That's good. Okay, well, thank you very much. Now for the school leader point of view from Harry. Go away.
Well, thank you very much. First and foremost, it's a real honour to be here to speak at your AGM. I do speak as a head teacher, but of course I also speak as a teacher, as a chair, as a father, and as a husband. And I think those things bring a great deal of empathy to my role. I actually am also a de facto social worker, counsellor, and youth worker as well. Some would argue that's because of austerity and a great deal of cuts. I would argue that if you're not that as a head teacher, then what are you actually doing? So I've got a number of different roles. My main role is being the head teacher of Cantel School in Southampton. We are a school of 1,200 students, and I'll talk a little bit more about Cantel in a minute. But if I said to you that my opening speech to parents on open evening is that if there was a school in the example in the Oxford Dictionary of comprehensive, it would be Cantel School, and I'll explain why shortly. I'm also really proud to have taken over as the chair of the Aspire Community Trust. We are a cooperative group of schools. We are not a multi-academy trust, but we are a cooperative group of schools that work together with a very simple vision of shaping the life chances of the youngsters in our care. That means we look at youngsters' milestones in terms of their learning journeys from the age of 4 right up to the age of 16 and beyond. And actually, we're doing some very exciting work with regards to curriculum development and making sure that there's absolutely the building on the great work from every single key stage. But also what it does do is provide valuable information about what our secondary school is doing to a greater community. And we've heard about the huge benefits of comprehensives and what parents might do, what organisations might do. But schools and secondary schools and comprehensives have a responsibility themselves. What is it that they are doing to ensure that they are the school of choice within that local area. I've been in education for 20 years, a senior leader for 15 years, and for 15 years this has been something of a turbulent journey. But we are there, we're not complacent. Last 3-4 years ago, for a 230 place year 7, we had 293 applications, which wasn't enough. We didn't fill, and as a PFI school we were forced, because of the funding, to mothball rooms. I'm pleased to say 4 years later we've had 600 applications and we've been oversubscribed for the last 2 years. That is because of what we do for our community and how we celebrate that and how we get that information out there. In terms of the school, I said that it was a true comprehensive. Let's see, 1,200 students. We're split 60-40 boys, girls. That's because of a local girls' school, which can have a dramatic effect, and also other schools that have gone co-ed that hadn't been co-ed before. We've got 52% of our population English as additional language, 67 languages spoken in the school, and just about 43% of our students come from a disadvantaged background. All of this creates the most wonderful, eclectic, comprehensive mix of youngsters, and every day is an absolute joy, although there are tears, I assure you. How have we got to where we are now as a comprehensive school of choice? Winning the support of parents is absolutely key, and for many years I would agree with the panel that it was about results, and it, for me, is simply not about results. Put yourselves as parents. What is it that you would want from a secondary school? For me, at the heart of it is trust. Knowing what your secondary school is doing is the right thing for each and every youngster. Along with that trust is absolute transparency. I will say to every one of our stakeholders, I won't get it right all the time. But by gosh, if I get it wrong, I'll do something about it and I'll change it and I won't make the same mistake twice. But in order for me to know, sometimes the systems and the structures in a school aren't always robust enough. And guess what? Parents, we need to work together. You might pick up on something that we haven't done. Communicate that with us, which is another key factor for schools. Let's talk about it, let's get it resolved, and let's get back on that trajectory of success. Care. Does a school really care? When you walk around that school, when you hear the school, when you hear the head teacher, the messages of the teacher, do you, as parents, as stakeholders, triangulate what is the vision of the school and hear it, see it, and feel it? I have, for the last 4 years as head of the school, when parents are making what is probably the most important decision in terms of secondary school choice, told them just to turn up. Don't make an appointment. We won't put on tours for you. You just turn up and we'll find someone to take you around the school. Because I am happy to show you the school, warts and all. Because that is what the school is about. That is what makes us so very special. And it won't always go right all of the time. But it's about the strength of the response that matters. The experience children get is very, very important. Very important. A grammar school, a private school, independent school, the perception is that the opportunities that exist there are varied, wide, and greater than comprehensives. So what is it that you do in a comprehensive to challenge that? What is it that you are able to provide to challenge it, and what is the narrative that you then provide? For us, in one academic year alone, we provide 88 different extracurricular clubs. Trinity College, Cambridge, said when they visited us that our club provision was similar to that of fee-paying schools. There's the narrative. That's what we do, but we don't do it to get more pupils. We do it because that's what the pupils deserve. So they deserve all of these weird and wonderful clubs that they want to have, And the staff want to do it as well. And when you've got that culture, it does become a very special place. Of course, parents want skills, qualifications. Very, very important. Very important. As a parent, I've seen my 15-year-old daughter develop as a youngster with maturity, and there is no doubt her local school has played a part in that. Inspirational teaching. We can all name, can't we, one teacher at least that made the difference for us. Well, I want that to be all of the teachers, all of the time. Because I'm a business studies teacher by background. Get me in a business studies classroom and I am at home. And I still teach because it's really important to continue to do that. Because I'm not a headmaster, I'm a head teacher. I am a teacher at the end of the day. In terms of that inspirational teaching and supporting teachers to be the best that they can be, having a drive for continuous improvement, focusing on continuing professional development to do the very best by each and every child is a culture that, if you get right, can have a huge impact on youngsters' life chances. In terms of academic excellence, we've talked about attainment. The Sunday Times recently published the top, whatever it was, state schools. I'm afraid my school isn't there. My school isn't there because the intake is significantly below the national averages. However, our youngsters leave above the national average. There is no Sunday Times around the progress that youngsters make individually. I'll not talk to you about Progress 8, because Progress 8 is about filling buckets. I won't talk to you about figures, because it is about the individual stories of ambition, drive and resilience that make the difference. And that is what parents want to know at the end of the day. To finish up, what schools should be looking to provide, what we aspire to provide, are two simple things. For our school to be able to give our youngsters friends for a lifetime. Those friends that you can call upon, that you hopefully will call upon now in times of joy and indeed sorrow, that will be there because of the experiences that you had at secondary school. But also memories for a lifetime, where you remember back with great fondness your secondary school. If we can achieve that, then I think we're winning. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Harry. I think we'll all agree, fantastic advocate for comprehensive schools. Thank you very much. Last but not least, we have Alexa.
Hi, my name's Alexa Collins. I am a parent in Buckinghamshire, and I'm also a parliamentary candidate for the Labour Party in Beaconsfield. So I'm on the back foot on two counts for a start, because Buckinghamshire is an entirely selective county, and I'm listening to all of the other panellists with absolute jealousy about the measurements and the choice and everything that can go on, because we don't have that in Buckinghamshire at all. It's a compulsory selection that our children have to do. People perceive grammar schools and this whole 11 plus thing as quite a good thing. So we have the added burden of educational tourism, and that skews our figures even more. So of our children passing the 11 plus in Buckinghamshire, 25% of those come from independent schools. So they're privately educated from prep school through to 11, and they're coached generally from 7. Another 25% come from outside the county. So actually the ability to access a state educated child, a primary school child, the chances of them accessing a grammar school place, a state-funded grammar school secondary place, is only 50% of the kids are getting in there. So when we start to look at some of these demographics, you know, people say, oh well, it's obviously the cleverest kids that go. It isn't at all. This is complete nonsense. One of the fundamental problems with the test in Bucks I think the admin was a bit hefty about how they sorted it out. So a few years ago they moved the test a bit earlier in the year. So within 2 weeks, I think, of the kids going back to school in September, all kids slip back a bit during the summer holidays anyway, but within 2 weeks they take the 11 plus. Unfortunately, under the national curriculum, we haven't actually taught them all of the content of the test at that point. So when I hear anecdotally, and everyone, believe you me, everyone's got an anecdote about the 11 plus, doesn't matter where you go. Anecdotally, apparently loads of kids pass this without any tuition at all. Well, I'd really love to know how, when the national curriculum hasn't actually been taught to the level that they need to take the test. So the chances of a child passing this test without tuition, pretty much impossible. And tuition is huge business in Buckinghamshire. I'm sure it's the same in Kent, I'm sure it's the same in Lincolnshire, I'm sure it's the same in Merseyside, in Trafford. There are a number of pockets in the country that have this issue. But Bucks is particularly special, where it is so forced upon us. Now, because of the educational tourism and everything around that, it actually means that around about 80% of local children in Buckinghamshire, until very, very recently, had zero opportunity to go to a good school. Now, I'm putting that in inverted commas because I'm talking about an Ofsted-rated good school. But this causes a huge perception issue. So to double up on the idea that grammar equals good, you have this whole requires improvement, special measures, this, that and the other, as schools slip down the scale. So I live in a village which currently has no secondary school, which is a bit of a shame because we're not in catchment for any other school. So it's great to hear about all these wonderful choices that parents can make. So in my village, whilst there was a secondary school, there were 2 schools that you could put on that form that were actually in catchment. Now there's only 1, and it's a grammar school, and the local village primary school had 1 child that passed the 11 plus test, and most of it's a 1 entry primary school, but there's 30 kids in that class. 1 passed last year, and at Chesham Independent School, I believe they're boasting on their website now about a 65% pass rate. So we have a big disparity here. But the fracturing that happens in the community because of this, we also happen to be on the county border. The choices we can make are for our children we put the choices down to go to the comprehensive schools in Maidenhead. And as soon as you do that, of course, you've chosen to go out of county. So you're not eligible for homeschool transport or anything like that, you have to pay. And I can actually chart the progress of this secondary school and its demise through, first of all, the wealthier families choosing not to go there and choosing to go out of county because they could afford the £700 on the bus, as then the only children going to that secondary school were less wealthy, couldn't afford the bus. I'm not saying that's the only reason, but eventually their intake has fallen so much that with only 15 people putting their names down for a school last year, the school had to go. It's absolutely awful. They refuse to accept that selection is part of the story there. And in fact, you know, they're now trying to start another secondary modern school, but apparently it will take 3 years to get that going. But what I find with trying to engage parents on this issue is parents fall into a couple of categories. Either they've been here in that county and in that system forever, and they don't actually know about comprehensive schools because they think that a secondary modern and a comprehensive is the same thing, until they're faced with the choice and their child just failed the 11 plus, at which point they can't get out to those comprehensive schools in Maidenhead quick enough. That is absolutely their goal. Then we have the people who've moved in from out of county, and they thought, oh, it's lovely, I'm moving out of wherever, I'm moving out from London, it's a bit cheaper out here, a bit of fresh air for the kids, you know, green leafy bucks. I've got to do what? When do I have to start tuition? What do you mean I'm not in the right postcode? But how can I get into this? And they realise that it's the only game in town. And I do not condemn a single parent who has to do this for their child, because they have to. They are so competitive. They need to do the best thing they can do to get their child into the best thing. But what we see in Buckinghamshire is this is social selection. It is educational apartheid. It is utterly wrong. I can map every area, I can literally draw them. Every area of deprivation in this county has the lowest educational outcomes. They just map exactly. So in the posh areas, I have educational outcomes in the top 10% of the country. And in the lower areas, even in very affluent Beaconsfield and all around, I have areas who are in the bottom 20% of educational and training outcomes in the country, not in the county. So the problem is trying to explain all this to parents really takes a long time, because it's really, really complicated and there are so many facets to it. But we've had a huge fiasco this year with the 11 Plus, that the administrator of the 11 Plus cocked up the test. Yeah, you wrote about it. I gave that to you. I gave that story. And
Don't reveal it. The secret source.
The problem with that is that the test was poorly administrated. It was administered differently in every test centre. Their outcomes were different as a result. Those actual educational tourists did quite well, because a lot of them came in a number of cohorts, got locked in, and so they didn't have the disruption of children in the middle of a test going, please miss, the answers aren't on the sheet. So we have a further worsening that the parents have discovered that because of academisation, the local education authority actually has no authority in this matter, because they don't administer the test. The test is administered by the grammar schools, who employ the company GL Assessment to do the test for them. And they've said that their statistical analysis is fine, there's nothing to see here, just move along. They've adjusted all the scores without skewing them, even though the problem was on the verbal reasoning, which carries 50% of the scores. They've knocked 6 answers off that. They won't tell us how many questions there were in total, so we can't quite figure out whether that's fair or not. So the verbal reasoning and the non-verbal are totally messed up. And apparently there's nothing to see here and no problem. So we have an issue with trying to educate parents as to the fact we've got a system that's broken for everyone. And the main thing that I think we do need to show them, that the results in comprehensive, the academic results as well as the social results, are better. They are better, and they need to see that, because they cannot get over the perception that grammar schools are good. They won't accept that there are other schools that are worse, because that all gets a bit nasty. But the other thing that we have to help to win the support of parents is to tell them how we can change it without disadvantaging anyone.
Thank you very much, Alexa. One quick question from me before we open up to the floor. You mentioned that selection is educational apartheid. Was it not quite disappointing to see nothing mentioned on this in your party's manifesto?
It was disappointing. One of the reasons, I think, is because it's too complicated to explain. And I do agree to a certain degree with Nuala, something we discussed in our AGM earlier. It's a sensitive issue. It's complicated to explain. Every time I campaign on it, people think I'm trying to take something away from them. And actually, I'm trying to give them good schools for everyone. I know we didn't get it into the manifesto. We did have a huge result at the Labour Party conference. The motion to finish selection, which was put by me, it was a reference back, so it was supported fully by the conference and by the unions. So it will go back into the policy forum this year, and I fully expect to see it in policy.
Thank you very much. Okay, we'll open to questions from the floor. I'm under strict orders that they have to be questions and not statements, so if we can keep it to questions, that would be brilliant. If you could please say who you are, where you're from, and who you would like to answer the question, that would be brilliant. Melissa.
Yeah, so I'm Melissa Benn, formerly Chair of Comprehensive Future, but also a parent. I want to say immediately I am still invited to dinner with people locally, but I have learnt not to talk about this throughout an entire meal. So my question is to Simon and to Harry, actually, very quickly. So Simon, I was sort of intrigued and a bit puzzled by what you were saying, and this comes back to my own experience. So when I was in the very active school market of North West London, we had a local primary where all parents went, you know, it was very socially mixed. And when it came to secondary choice, what you found was that the admissions policies of schools surrounding the local school took certain children and not others. So you said the thing about music and dance not being that huge. Actually, the single-sex faith schools and the co-ed faith schools tended to take the higher achieving children. Grammars in the wider area took the higher achieving or middle class children, and then of course private schools soak up the rest. And our local school, which was in a very wealthy area, was seen as the sink school, which is also contradicts what you were saying. So I'm really interested in your view about admissions policies, which I was so glad you mentioned them, because Comprehensive Future we do campaign on it, but I felt you were looking at it from another angle. So that's my question to you, and my question to Harry is really quite straightforward. There are so many people who run brilliant comprehensives, but I don't think you can ever match the privilege of private and grammar schools in terms of the affluent intake and the advantages that they get. So would you like to see the phasing out of selective and private schools so that your comprehensive could be even more brilliant than the one that you're running? Sorry, 2 questions.
No worries. Do you want to go first, Simon?
So just to start with, I'm completely against grammar schools. I think they create inequality and they reduce social mobility. Those of us who research on grammar schools, we call it the zombie policy. Whoever, almost everybody I know who researches grammar schools finds that they reduce social mobility. We keep trying to kill it and it keeps coming back, so it's something else going on. So I'm against grammar schools. Private schools are locally important. So in London, the bits of London, they're very important. In Bristol, actually, there are a lot of private schools. Nationally, they're 7% of students. So nationally, I think if you live in an area where private schools are very important, I don't mean you, I mean people have a bigger idea of their role in life. So I'm not entirely grasping the question you're asking me, so let me just sort of talk for a minute and you tell me if I missed it. Schools have different admissions criteria. Siblings is often important, is almost always important, looked after children, special needs, that kind of thing. Siblings are very important. Faith schools, some schools have special criteria for the children of armed forces, the children of people who work in schools. But the single biggest thing is in the end, if it is a very oversubscribed school, and I'd be interested to know what method you use, you have to have a tiebreaker. You have to have something that says this kid yes, that kid no. And the one that's used most of all across schools, I'm talking about the whole of England, is some kind of distance measure, some kind of how many kilometres between your front door and the school, or which postcodes do you live in, or are you in a postcode that's designated as a catchment area. And that's what generates, I think we estimated 2/3 of the difference in the chances of going to a high-performing school if you're a disadvantaged kid and you're not a disadvantaged kid. So the elbows and the violins, yes, they matter, but they don't matter as much as this pricing out access to the good schools through high house prices.
Let's take this, not take this outside. I was going to say let's discuss it. Let's discuss this further, because I think my argument is that admissions criteria is often quite subtle and filter out poorer children. And so I think they're more important than you seem to suggest. But I totally agree that they're important.
and I'm not at all trying to say that that's nothing. What I do want to insist on, because we've tried to measure these things, and I do want to say that those are the sorts of things that people get very het up about, and people can say, oh, it's terrible, shouldn't be allowed, we've got to filter these things out. And probably that's true, but we all just walk past the bigger thing, the more important thing, which is about proximity. And if we could do something about that, we'd make a big difference as opposed to a little difference.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing would be what your answer to that would be, but sorry, that's the third question.
I'm happy to answer that.
Yeah.
Okay, so with regards to your question, what I'd say was that when I was at the age of 10, I sat at the back of the classroom whilst my parents had a conversation with my teacher, and it went something along the lines of, I don't think he will pass the 11 plus. I still remember that, and I'm not sure whether that had any direct correlation to my drive and ambition for the youngsters in my care, but certainly what I would say is that I'm proud to be, and proud and slightly ashamed to be a head teacher from a BME community representative only 3% in this country. I don't want to make any exact comments, because what I'd want to say is that I've long been an advocate of controlling the controllables, and I can only control what happens within my school, and I will do the very best to provide an exceptional experience for the youngsters in my care, and now those youngsters prior who are coming up from the age of 4 as well.
Yeah, Val Patterson from, I work with parents and communities in Kensington and Chelsea, and one of the things a lot of our children suffer from is this selection by the back door at sixth form. I think this must be right across London, and certainly where there are lots of conglomerations of schools with sixth forms. So we've noticed that schools now, you can only stay on to the sixth form if you get the highest top grade. So you've got to get the 8s or the 9s, 7s, 8s or 9s, the old A stars and Bs. You couldn't stay on, and pupils are being told in the January before they do their GCSEs, you need to apply for sixth form, other colleges, because you may not get, you're not likely to get the grades. So that obviously has a very depressing effect on those children. But what happens that when they then leave, they go to a smattering of colleges across West and North London, and when you're not with your friends, you might survive. You've got, you may.
Question or?
But what I want to know is, from an academic point of view, or from a political point of view, or from a campaign point of view, can we try and campaign? Because this is actually happening across our schools. This is selection by the back door.
So should we go to Madeleine, thoughts on that, and also, I guess we'll all be against it.
But it's about can we have a campaign around that's actually happening now? There's been no legal law. There's been no law to say that we can select, but that is actually happening in schools now.
Yeah.
Can I help here?
Yeah.
I might be able to help here,
Please
and
do
if
so.
not, please step in.
The rules are really complicated around selection.
Yeah, I was going to say also selection for
Right.
sixth form is a different issue completely.
Yeah.
And in all fairness to the group here,
Okay.
it's not. I tell you what though, Pat. Is it Pat?
Val.
Val, I beg your pardon. I don't mind talking to you because it's an area that I do research in.
Okay.
Let's leave it because it's not
Okay.
in just one. Just because here we are talking, are we not, about school admissions for secondary? And in fairness to people, the panel weren't expecting to
Okay,
answer.
all right.
I don't mind speaking to you afterwards.
Okay.
Val.
I'm going to add a little
Yes, of
point
course.
to
I
that,
just
though.
thought if it helped. That's all.
Because of living in a completely selective area, we already suffered that
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
11. So those kids all
Yeah,
disappear
absolutely.
into totally different schools in totally different towns in
Yeah.
the instance of where I live. So that social fracturing starts
Yeah.
then, and it's no good.
yeah.
Now, so we have these children who, in my case, they've not passed the 11 plus, so they've gone off to other places. They probably have the chance to stay on at wherever they are at their comprehensive school and do A levels, and that's absolutely fine. I suggested to my own daughter, as she was doing her GCSEs, that she might like to apply for a grammar school. shoot me now. But the grammar school's down the road. It was going to save me 700 quid on the bus. She's a clever girl. Why wouldn't I look to go to the closest school to me? The proximity is there, and she would get the results. First of all, I was utterly ashamed as a parent because she said, well, I can't go there because I failed 5 years earlier. I mean, that was the most heart-wrenching thing that I thought, oh no, I've not explained this properly. But also, that was the point at which I became very aware that the kids in the local grammar school, why were there places in the grammar school? Because there's no places in the grammar school. It's hugely oversubscribed. So why can you go there? Well, you can go there because of off-rolling. Because if you start to hint to these kids that they're probably not going to hit the grades, and they may well have been the kids who were tutored to get in there in the first place, who were never part of this this natural selection. John's article on Cyril Burt tells you everything you need to know about why the 11 plus was flawed in the very first place. But you end up with this completely ridiculous construct of kids being shunted in, pushed out, someone else going in. It's utterly ridiculous. I think it's a terrible idea, and legally they're not supposed to do it, but it does seem to happen. The numbers seem to be there.
Legally they can select the sixth form. What they can't do is off-roll.
They can't off-roll, but they can select.
Do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, just to say quickly, I mean, I guess the question is what's motivating those sixth forms to have those very high levels of qualification at GCSE? And for me, the problem is our accountability system, which obviously gives brownie points to the sixth forms that are getting amazing A levels. Secondly, I feel really strongly, because I make films about innovation in education and different ways to run schools and have different curriculums. I think that we are just stuck in the dark ages in terms of evaluating our young people by these very narrow academic, high stakes hurdles we put them through. And if you look to America, for example, where we've had a lot of awful things come from American education, but actually now there's a lot of innovation going on. There's something called the Mastery Transcript, which a group of private schools are innovating in the States, which is about trying to measure children at 18. They don't have an exam at 16 in the States, as a lot of people know, in a much broader way, with modules of capability. You take the module, and if you don't get through it, then you do it another time. It's staged, not aged, a bit like a driving test. And then the universities have a much, much more sophisticated assessment of a given student. So for me, so much of our problems boil down to really this very narrow way in which we see intelligence in this country. And that's what feeds the 11 plus. Oh yes, well some people are intelligent, some people aren't. We must have a test to find out which ones are intelligent. And of course they must be educated separately, because why not? I mean, I could go on. I won't.
Okay, that's quite a few.
Will.
Shall we take maybe 3 questions quite quickly, and we'll try and get through them all. So the fellow at the front, and the woman in the blue top, and the woman behind.
First of all, a confession, former governor for over 30 years at Coattail School, and a parent of boys who are now in their late 40s, and sitting next to somebody who taught them art. But what's always annoyed me within this whole debate is there are far more comprehensive school heads than there are grammar school heads. There's a very strong Grammar School Heads Association that lobbies the government, particularly this current government, very well. So part of the story that needs to be told is the success of comprehensive. Yes. And why aren't the heads of all those comprehensive, Harry and other people, getting together and telling that story? I could tell you the people that are at school with my children, who are, one's a professor of organic chemistry at Cambridge, another one's just gone back into being a surgeon after having had children and started to grow up. There are some success stories, of huge success stories. Drummer of Coldplay's another one.
Is there a question? Can I just check quickly?
Yeah, that's it. Why aren't the comprehensive heads fighting the good story?
I guess that's one for you.
Well, I think there are a number of comprehensive heads that meet together. Heads Round Table would be one, where there are a number of strong head teachers that meet and do lobby the government. I guess the question I would ask is, where is the value? Is the value greater in a group of comprehensive heads or is the value in a group of grammar head teachers? I'm not asking that from you, but I'm asking that from politicians, and I wonder, I do have a hypothesis of where that value is being placed. And indeed, when we look at politicians and we look at the schools that they tend to visit, there is a clear link between the communities they serve, the type of organisation they are, whether they're a grammar or not, and the number of visits being undertaken. So I think that happens. I think there are heads lobbying, but whether we are making the difference or not is a question not yet answered.
You're right, and we'll just take the two quickly from you two later.
How about something completely different? There are some academies, and I'm no advocate for academies, as people know, that go from 3 to 18 or 3 to 16. And all primary schools are comprehensive, and most parents choose a local school and get into a local school. So I'm also an advocate for early years up to the age of 7, because most other countries have their early years education up to 7. So why don't we, and could we find a political party, maybe, Alexa, that could advocate, as I asked them to do, for education up to 7 for early years, and then from 7 to 18, or 7 to 16, so there is no transfer to a different school, and avoids the whole issue altogether. And I'd like to know each panellist's view on that.
Okay.
The Steiner system goes like that too.
I've got a quick question for Simon and a quick question for Harry. Simon, I think if I understood you properly, you said that the data shows that the parents are not wanting a local school; they're choosing the better school. Is that correct? Did I hear you say that?
I didn't use the word better. I said that for families who do not put their nearest school top, they put a different school top, on average, the school that they put on their form as their first choice has got a higher level of GCSE scores.
So could we agree that parents want a good local school? Because your data would actually return to that position. If you have a good quality school, that's still what parents would want. That's
Is there another question just quickly? Or is
yeah,
that
quickly to Harry. I teach education leadership at Exeter, and we are sort of steering students away from the idea of heroic models of leadership, which tend to be in that sort of hierarchical thing of grammar schools and that sort of older tradition. And I was wondering about you that I can imagine you being the heroic model, and I just
That wasn't a compliment, was it?
It is a compliment, but it's also we're suggesting that it doesn't actually produce a good environment for everybody below, because and I just wonder if you've got a view about the management style of comprehensive education that should differ from the grammar school type of education that's more distributive, I think.
so if you answer that, Harry, and then
Yeah.
each of you will have the say on the age range.
Yeah,
Question for you.
absolutely. So what I'd say with regards to leadership in schools, for me, I'm a servant leader all day long. So it's all about the people and empowering
Did
the
you
staff.
say servant?
Servant leadership, yeah. So it's about making sure that there is the right balance between support, challenge, and ultimately holding people to account. Now, I've got 146 members of staff in Cantel School, and my aim is to empower them to do the best that they do, and particularly the teachers, to make sure that they are able to teach fantastic, inspirational lessons. So it's not about heroic leadership. It's about distributed leadership and servant leadership, and making sure that we are there and that we walk the talk every day. And that is really what kind of makes the difference. It is being out and about, checking, being a barometer, checking the temperature, so to speak, of the school, knowing what the strengths are, not just on your self-evaluation, but really knowing it, living it, knowing what the areas for development are, and knowing whether they are improving because of what the school is doing. So I am a strong advocate of servant leadership, which enables others to be empowered to do the best that they can do.
Thank you.
And just quickly, do you all just want to have a quick comeback on the question about the ages?
Okay, so an all-through school, there are schools out there that are all through, all the way from the start of a child's career to 18. I'm not sure it's 3 to 18, but there are certainly 5 to 18 schools out there. I don't off the top of my head know any stats about how they do. So I think you were saying all through school would be good because you wouldn't have a transition and the stress, and because I understood you to say that choosing schools would be taken out of the picture completely. I'm not sure I agree with those two. I think that we know that an average secondary school is 7 times bigger than an average primary school in terms of the number of kids. So that would only work if you had extremely large primary schools or extremely small secondary schools that couldn't offer a big curriculum. Or you have to have one school but different parts, in which case I think there still would be a transition. So I don't think you'd win that one in terms of getting the no transition. In terms of the school choice, my sense is that it would actually make it much, much bigger because your kid was going to be in this school from age 3 to age 18. So in a sense, it's a much bigger choice than just 5 to 11 or 12 to 18. So it's not. It doesn't seem to me to be the obvious answer to parental stress, or if you want to remove the issue of choice. I don't think that's going to do it.
And just quickly.
Quickly. Sure. I mean, I do think the choice agenda is so entrenched in this country, and when the Abolish Eating campaign got going, we had a lot of discussion on this thing that I've helped run called Rescue Our Schools, and it was amazing to see how many people defended the idea that rich people, although they didn't quite phrase it that way, should have the choice to send their child to whatever school they wanted to. So I think that actually, although I agree with you, it would be great to remove the anxiety over transition, the only way we're going to win this is to change attitudes and to positively sell the virtue of your child being educated in the community with everybody, whatever their background, in a mixed ability setting. And I get as angry about setting as I do about comprehensives. No wonder people feel that they're disempowered if you tell them from the age of 11, you're in the bottom set, love. What does that do to them? And it's as bad as 11 plus. You know, these are comprehensive, sorry. And so we need to make every school brilliant. There are schools doing it, XP School in Doncaster, no setting, amazing results. We need those schools in every community.
I will come in quickly. I like the idea of it ideologically. I think funding makes it complicated. I also think that I like the way that you broke it, rather than the through schools from 5 to 18, breaking it at 7. Maybe a bit later even might be a bit more manageable, because I think there is something quite nice about your infant school and primary school environment, and then you go up to big school, and that is quite a different type of environment. Because of the funding nature, you need a lot of pupils to be able to offer a wider curriculum once you're moving into that bigger academic scale. So one of the things that's being looked at the moment in my village is a through school. And Derek and I went to a meeting. This is the meeting that Derek was talking about earlier. We went to that through school, and I challenged the head of it. He was a very popular, very successful head teacher of a local primary school. And I said, this is great. So you've told us your 2-form entry has to go into this through school to get the funding. Plus you then need another 3 forms of entry to make it financially viable, or you're not going to make it work. So I said, obviously, as all your parents love your school, love your teaching, love being there, I assume that you are going to advise all of those parents to opt out of the 11 plus so that they can stay at your through school. She said, no, I wouldn't advise my parents to do that. So we're talking about the attitudes of the parents, but I mean this is a very ambitious head teacher who's not even going to get the number of pupils to get the funding to make her idea work. We've got to change attitudes all around to do this.
Thank you very much. Can we just quickly wrap up? 2 minutes? Is that okay? Or, yeah, we've got enough time to do that.
I'm sure they won't boot us out, do they?
Okay, so one final question to each of you, and we've already gone over time, so 10 seconds each onto one sentence. The topic of today is comprehensive education, winning the support of parents. So one thing you can say, one thing, how do we do that in 10 seconds?
I think I do about 10. But
the most important, what is the...
Well, I think trust, transparency, and absolute care, you know, and everything else fits in.
Yeah, Simon?
Make school admissions fairer.
Perfect. Madeleine?
Sell the virtues of educating people together as better than any private school or selective school or exclusive environment. Kids will have the skills they need if they're educated with empathy and understanding other people's points of view.
Give parents the data in really simple form, not huge research papers, bite-sized chunks. Tell them why comprehensives are better, why the results are better, why the social outcomes are better, why it's better for their child. It's even better for the environment if they're not travelling all over the place. They're just better, and we need to educate our parents that that's the case.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Can we have a round of applause for